Hello, good afternoon. We are excited to welcome you all here to our webinar to this afternoon. We have been chit-chatting a little bit and have already started some really great conversations, so I know everybody that's tuning in today is in for a big treat. The first thing I want to say is about the chat a little bit. You should be able to see the chat on your screen. To get used to that chat, because we do encourage you to ask questions today, but to get used to that chat, I'm going to ask that you guys hop on there, tell us who you are, where you're from, what your organization or institution is, and maybe something you're looking forward to getting out of our hour-long session today. So we just want to know a little bit about who's in the audience, and so we'll be looking at that a little bit as we do our introductions today, but we're really excited to have everyone here. Our webinar today is focusing on the experiences of Black athletes and allies that support those athletes. And today we're excited to hear those stories from our panelists. You and me both. I can't wait. I have my notebook ready to go, ready to take all the notes in the world and then just shout them out to my student athletes later on today. We also want you to continue to consider race, diversity, and inclusion within your departments, whether that's an athletic department, a collegiate campus, your high schools, whatever those departments may look like, and to begin actively allowing these topics to play a part in your everyday life. I think the way we can grow best is if we get used to talking about these things on a more regular basis. So to start it out, I'm Kristen Rustbolt. I'm the Associate AD of Student Athlete Support Services and also the Diversity and Intercultural Engagement Coordinator here at UNC Greensboro in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm honored to have partnered with the Institute to promote athlete health and wellness and their launch of the Athlete Wellbeing Network. And today I'll be your moderator and super excited and honored to do that. And so today I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists, and then we're going to learn a little bit about each of them, hear their stories, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and our tech team behind the scenes will get those up to get to me so that I can ask our wonderful panelists these questions and get some really great feedback. So first, I'd like to introduce Joe Ehrmann. He is a 13-year professional football player. He's the author of the book Inside Out Coaching: How Sports Can Transform Lives. He is also the subject of the New York Times bestseller, Season of Life, A Football Star, a Boy, A Journey to Manhood. Joe is leading the NFL Foundation-funded Inside Out initiative aimed at implementing education-based athletics that are co-curricular, character-based, and led by transformational coaching. I had planned today to show you the picture of the book, but I actually 2 weeks ago lent it out to one of my student athletes to read. So you are making an impact even here in our department every day. Excited to hear from you today and honored to be on a call with you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Deanne Brooks. Dr. Deanne Brooks is an associate professor of kinesiology at UNC Greensboro. Deanne is a former NCAA All-American student athlete and has coached track and field on the youth, high school, and collegiate level for over 20 years. Deanne is also a personal friend and one of my mentors, and I am just so proud to have her on the call with us, and she makes me more at ease doing these things. And then finally, we have Leland Brown, a former football NCAA student athlete and founding director of operations, Promise Prep, and founder of RUE, which is building better business via belonging. I can't wait to hear more about that and check out all the things that you have going on too. He's also a graduate and former student athlete at Bethel College, North Newton. And the coolest thing I learned about him today is he's also an opera singer. So hopefully he'll throw some of those stories at us with that. He's also a graduate with his master's degree from the University of Cincinnati. Leland, Deanne, Joe, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to get this conversation started. So let's not listen to me anymore, and let's turn it over to you all and get this rolling. Sound good? Okay, Deanne, I'm gonna start with you today. So you are awesome in all ways, and I know this, but you also earned All-American honors in the triple jump, which is just amazing. What a great accomplishment. Not many people, I'm sure, have that same accomplishment, but tell us about, that and how growing up in sports played a role in your life and into college, and what sports meant to you.
Yeah, so sports has meant so much to me from the time, I guess, from as early as I can remember and on through now. I mean, right now I have what I think is the best job in the world. I get to learn all the time and talk about what I'm learning to a great group of students, but also as a kinesiologist, I get to talk about sports. I get to teach our Foundations of Sport class here at UNCG. And so that background that I have continues daily in my life now, but of course, I was a full scholarship athlete to college, so sport to me meant a free education. Turns out that the opportunities that I had as an undergraduate led to a free master's degree. And then on to my doctoral program where I studied sport even more. And so, from an educational standpoint, sports meant so much. And I mean, financially, and as well as in other ways. But for me, sports is part of what my family does. And I'm going to talk some about my family today, but I have a big brother, Donnie Davis, who was an athlete, baseball, football, track, basketball. My dad was that community member who coached all of my brother's sports, but at this point has coached several generations of athletes across my town, the east side of Burlington, North Carolina. And so my brother is 5 years older than I am. And I clearly remember being in full football gear in my backyard. My dad was the coach, so we had the uniforms out in the storage area. I was in full football gear. My brother and all of his friends, who were made to include me by my father, played on their knees so that I could play football in the backyard. So it was family, it was social, it was academic, it was vacations, and now it's my profession. But I also have three little girls, and my oldest is deeply involved. So it continues for me as I coach, but also now I'm a sport parent. So it has just been a major part of my life from the time I was young and continues to do so today.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. We're gonna come back to you in a second. I'm gonna jump over to Leland and Leland, tell us a little bit about your experiences in sport, and as it relates to being a Black man in sport and playing football, and what are some of the different experiences you had between maybe high school and college, or anything that you saw as significant in growing up in sport?
Yeah, so I want to answer this question by outlining 5 specific areas in which they were different. And the first is individualism versus collectivism. So while in high school interscholastic athletics, it seemed as if we were fighting or vying for this game collectively, right? Coaches cared about the cohesive unit. They coached to the team. But when I got to college, I realized that it was more about the individual. And what I mean by that is the second point is coaches were developing the player, yet not the person, right? So I have this belief that you can't spell success without us, right? And the first 2 letters of success is us. But when you're coaching specifically to players or to individuals, what happens is people feel left behind on that team. And of course, right, like each team may have that 1-star athlete that's that All-American, but the coaches, the coach's job is to make everyone feel a part of the team, to make them feel included, right, and to give each one of them what they need in order to succeed, which is equity. And so individualism and collectivism, develop the player versus developing the person, and then next is this idea of the game versus the business of athletics, right? So in high school or and I played football in Texas, so some would say that Texas is as large when it comes to football, and football is sacrilegious in so many ways. But we got to have fun. There was nothing riding on the game itself. There was no capital, right, riding on the game. It wasn't that serious. It was a game. And coaches and players made it feel that way. When we got to college, we realized, and coaches would quite literally hold it over our heads that you have this scholarship, and so this is your job. So when you toil, right, like this dangle, right, this baton or dangle this scholarship over players' heads, which happened in my experience, then some resentment may end up going into playing the game, because now it's not a game, it's a business, and you've seen, or it seems as if the game has become transactional. And then lastly, rural versus urban. So I moved from Galveston Island, Texas, which is home of Beyonce, Barry White, and also the first black heavyweight champion of the world, Jack Johnson. But I moved from there to rural Kansas to play football. And in rural Kansas, a lot of times college was the first time in which our white counterparts had ever seen a black person. And not only the first time they saw a black person, the only time they had saw black people were on TV. And the only time they show us on TV is when we're doing the most asinine things, right? Like the most benign things. And so that's the idea of who they had coming into college, us being. And on my first year on the team, we ended up having a race riot because of it. And so things as bad as nooses hanging in our dorm rooms and such. And so with that rural versus urban aspect played a lot into race relations and my understanding of the sport, but so did the other 4 areas that I spoke about.
Great. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Next, we are going to move to Joe. Joe, talk about your past experience as an athlete and your current experiences working as an activist, and how that's embedded as you're working with athletes of color in regards to your experiences over the years.
Yeah, well, thank you. Very nice to be with everyone. Let me just give you a little context. I was in high school and college in the 60s, right at the convergence of the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the war on poverty, and all the questions sounding like that. And it's really amazing to think here we are 50 years later in America, and we're still marked by racism and sexism and all these isms that marginalize and minimize other human beings. But 50 years ago, this year, 50-year anniversary, in 1970, I was playing football at Syracuse University, and all 9 black players walked off the team that spring in an act of protest. Not only a racial protest, but really on the betterment of the entire athletic department, football team for sure. Anyhow, the team quickly got divided. We never had one meeting, never once came together. The coach, who it was very much a racist system, divided the team. Black players ended up sitting out an entire season. I was on the wrong side of that morally, as a human being, as a man, certainly as a teammate. And that has really marked me. It marked me to make me realize all of us, and particularly as white people, we've got to understand our own racialized understanding of human beings, how we define whiteness, which is never really defined except in contrast to other. It's us and other, which creates really a host of problems. But I've been able to take that, look at it from a coach's perspective. What is the social responsibility of coaches in terms of coaching toward a society where everybody lives with dignity and status, has opportunities in America? So just did the 50-year anniversary, and me and one of the black players, Greg Allen, sat on a stage, virtual stage, for the athletic department. That's now become a movie. But, I think in 50-year difference, I think, to pick up that title ally, I think it's a much heavier title. There's much more responsibility today. We've had allies, there's been allies in this movement of racial equity and justice for 50 years now. But, and I agree with what's her name that wrote White Fragility, but it's really it's the white liberal allies is really where the challenge is. How do we take that to the next level? And I think to be an ally means you've got to do your own internal work. You've got to understand the prejudices that you bring to the table, that you participate in and support every day. So very fortunate in the initiative to be able to start teaching coaches how to develop their own racial narrative. In the Black Lives Movement matter, I think you saw a lot of white college coaches that didn't know what to say, didn't know how to speak into that situation. And really, I think it's, as an educator, it's a responsibility to educate your players into that. And don't just assume they're going to assimilate. You have to intentionally help understand who they are and help players understand who each other is as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's really great information, and I've got some follow-up questions for you in a second. We're going to move back to Deanne and Leland, Deanne, Joe. As you guys hear things, if you want to, insert right after, just you tell me to lock it up, and I will, because I definitely want to hear more from you than from me. So, but Deanne, I want to jump back to you real quick. You mentioned your family and how important that was in sport. Can you tell me a little bit more about maybe, the people that lifted you up and maybe how they got you through those times, and if there were specific challenges you faced, and what the importance of those people, had in your life as you went through sport?
Yeah, and I think this is a good follow-up to what Joe was saying, because my experience from a very young age was mainly in track and field. I played basketball, softball, track and field, but track was the one that I spent the most of my time with. And so from the perspective of being a young Black girl in sports, track was a protected space for me and for us. And I've been looking at I stay on the NCAA demographics database, but something like 73 or 74% of Division I athletes who are Black women are either on a basketball team or an indoor or outdoor track team. So my experience was unique and special, and as I said, protected, because when I left my house and went to practice, I still saw people who looked like me. And my coaches looked like me. My first track and field role models, I had people in my sport. My first Black History project was on Wilma Rudolph. I came up in the 80s with FloJo and Evelyn Ashford and Jackie Joyner Kersey. So I was able to see these elite world-class women doing my sport, and they looked like me. But the other part of that is that my coaches were African American people, Black people who were born and raised in the 50s and 60s, teenagers in the 60s and 70s. And by the time they became our coaches, they were professionals. So my first track coach was a woman named Dr. Brenda Armstrong. She was the second Black female board certified pediatric cardiologist in the United States. She passed away 2 years ago. At that time, she was one of the deans of admission for Duke Medical School, and she is credited for diversifying cardiology in the United States because she made their admissions policies more inclusive. But Doc was my coach, right? She was a Black woman who was one of the first Black students at Duke University, and she was a leader of the Allen Building Administration takeover in 1969. My Uncle Frank founded the track club that I'm talking about, the Durham Striders. He went to a segregated high school in Hamlet, North Carolina. My dad went to that same high school. He was the first class to integrate. And so the point is that these were people who were my coaches in my sport. And so when it comes to supporting the whole athlete, they knew what it meant to be Black in America. They knew what it meant to be equipped to survive that, and then not only survive, but thrive. My dad is the first Black administrator for the city of Burlington, my town. So these were people who didn't have to be, and I'm going to talk about representation. They didn't have to go through training to know how to raise me, right? And that is what is so important. These conversations are vital, and we need to teach people how to talk across difference, but we also need people who have been there and are able to see folks and to prepare them for what's coming. And so, you know, in terms of who lifted me up, there were those coaches, but I hit the jackpot in terms of family. When you think of soul food, that's my family. The first time I took my husband to my grandma's house when we were dating, it was a Sunday. And he was like, "Is this a family reunion?" I was like, "No, it's just a Sunday." Right? There were always cousins and aunts and uncles and cousins and aunts and uncles who I didn't know how they were my cousins and aunts and uncles, but they were my kin, right? And so that was the community that raised me. When we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, that was my upbringing. But it was also surrounded by people who could, who taught us what Black pride was, but it could also speak from a position of what the world might see in us. When we traveled as a youth track team 60 deep, mostly Black kids from North Carolina to a place like Minnesota, you know, I'm learning now as an adult who's coaching with that track club that there were times when we showed up and our reservations somehow disappeared, right? They couldn't find the reservations. And so when I, you know, as a kid, I'm having fun riding an hour to the track. We're riding an hour because our hotel that was closer to the track didn't honor our reservations. And so again, when I talk about people who lifted me up, there were so many folks who recognized what it means to teach a Black kid how to be excellent given all that is going to face them. When I got to college, even as a college athlete, again, track and field was a protected space for me. My head coach wasn't he was a white man, but he had to know who we were. He had to know that it was problematic, that swim practice was going to be problematic. You know, the hair situation, coach, maybe you don't understand, but you need to listen to us, right? He knew what that was. And so I often think about the need to, I like USA Lacrosse, USA Tennis, what they're doing, USA Soccer around diversity and inclusion, because I can't imagine what it means to be the kind of little Black girl I was, stepping into an all-white space just so that I could play. That is a barrier that I hope we can work to break down. And so I say I was very supported in sport, very supported outside of sport, but in my case, the two were always intertwined. And I feel really lucky for having that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great, you know, it's a great picture to paint, because it shows that when you are supported, you have, you know, you're going to be able to flourish. And I love what you said, that, you know, you have family members and mentors that were equipped to survive and thrive. And I think that says a lot about your experiences. Leland, same kind of question to you. You know, are there people that were purposely supporting you, or there's, you know, what were your experiences in that kind of realm?
All right, so going to college, just like every football player, I thought that I was headed to the NFL. I quickly realized I was a little too short and slow to make it, and the NFL stood for not for long. And so what I realized was I had to tap into not only the potential that was inside of me, but I had to maximize my purpose. And the real way to maximize my purpose was in experiencing everything that college had to offer. Which meant experiencing theater, experiencing opera and becoming a singer, experiencing choir, learning to speak, because I had spoken Ebonics and I grew up in such impoverished household, 12 kids, 6 people killed in my family, shot and killed in my family before 17, right? 4 people, you know the story, you've heard it before. And so I knew that I needed college to tap into the real purpose that was inside of me. And thus, I knew my coaches would have to allow me to experience these things. But you remember earlier I said that in college, this idea of sports it moves from the game to this business. And so because of the business of sport, while I was in college, I went through 3 head coaching changes and 13 assistant coaches changes. So 16 coaches in total. It wasn't until my 3rd coach in which I fully felt supported. During my 3rd year of college, I actually had to quit football because of the coach not wanting me to engage in activities in which helped me maximize my purpose. And I was smart enough to know that I would step away from the game because I had other years of eligibility. But during these harsh situations of going through coaching changes, not having supportive coaches, and then finally having a supportive coach my senior and 5th year, I realized what coaches were supposed to do. And I pulled out the greatness inside of the coach that truly tapped into my purpose, and more importantly, that supported me and got me through. What he was able to do was what I think my life's mission is, and what I think every coach's life mission is. And my life mission is simple. I want to be P. Diddy. All right, look, I want to be Diddy, okay? But I don't want to be Diddy in some like no sense of hubris, like no pride, no humility type of way. I want to be the living embodiment of what Diddy represents. Puff Daddy, if you don't know him, my guy, right? So what Diddy is able to do, and what I think every coach should be able to do in this country, is take people's potential and make them believe in their purpose. So he takes this guy by the name of Christopher Wallace, who's big in stature, but he doesn't have, right, like the belief in himself. He doesn't know what his purpose is. And what he's able to do is make him feel so good. He's able to tap into this guy's potential and turn it into purpose and make this guy not just anybody, the notorious B.I.G. He takes Little Kim and he makes her the largest woman you've ever seen. He puts the faith in Faith Evans. I'm just saying, P. Diddy is the man. And then he's in the videos. Come on, he's on the stage vibing with the people. He's doing his thing. But he's not on the stage because they don't want him there. He's on the stage because he helps them believe in themselves. He helps them tap into their purpose. Everybody has it. Everybody has a purpose on this world, right? Like on this earth, every single athlete does. From like that little guy playing pee-wee football to that big guy who's about to go to the NFL. His name is Joe Ehrman, right? Like everybody has a purpose. And all we have to do is take the potential away from them and tap into the purpose. Because potential is what my coach, who I said was the most supportive, Maurice Lawler, he would often say that potential is a French word for you ain't done a thing. You're going to. Oh, but when you find purpose, you know exactly where you're going, right? When you know the purpose, right, of why you wake up every single day to work hard so that you can take those tools to then use them in the real world as a professional. When you understand the purpose behind that, thus you tap into and you throw away that potential. It becomes, right, tangible, as we call it, right? And so thank you for allowing me to answer that question, but I urge all of you who are in student athlete support roles, SASH roles, if you're in coaching roles, if you're in consultation roles, whoever you work with, even at home, remember, you can be P. Diddy too. You're a maximizer. You tap into purpose.
I love it. I'm hyped. Want to go inspire somebody right now. I love it. Kind of going off that, Joe, how do we find this purpose? What are the tools that we can, through your experiences, what are the tools that we can grasp to help other athletes that are growing up to have experiences similar to Deanne's maybe and to Leland's, those positive experiences? What can we do as in our roles that we currently have?
Well, I think the first thing is that all of us got to do our own internal work. All of us have to be on this quest to be the best version of who we are. Those student athletes need that, demand that. So I think you spend a lifetime. I'm 72, and I think you have to spend a lifetime getting up every day and set your intentions for that day and how you're going to become a healthier, more whole person. And, breathe in the air of racism that we have in America. It formulates within us. And again, I talk as a white American, but it's a processing that is very individual. That you've got to do your work, but it's also communal. You've got to do your work with other people and with people that are different than you. So I just think we create all these programs and we have all these works going on, but really until you do your own work, until you understand and come to a place where you believe in the inherent value and worth of every human being. And that's really part of the purpose. All of us are born with they're the existential questions. Why am I here? What am I to do? But all of us have this purpose. And, you look at Maslow's self-actualization, the hierarchy, that's in order to serve. So I think AA's got it right. Keep your thumb on the pain of society and to keep open and process. But you got to do your work. You got to keep showing up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the things that I wonder in our field and in working with young athletes. Are there, Deanne and Leland and Joe, are there specific examples you can pull from your experiences of a time maybe that somebody did, you can saw a change, or they went out of their way to kind of make sure that you were supported, or is there, something, just an example of a way that that you saw somebody make that change? Because I think that's what, and I can't speak for all white people, but I know a lot of white professionals are questioning how do we make that change? What are the things we can be doing right now to support a young Black student, in the classroom, on the field, those kinds of things. So maybe using your own examples of how that happened to you, or when it didn't happen to you and you thought, if they could have just done this differently.
Well, I can start with that. I can give two examples. One is not a white person, but it was a Black woman, Janice Hilliard. Kristen, I've sent you some of her information. She's a consultant now, so you should everybody Google her, the Women in Athlete Development Symposium. But Dr. Hilliard was the Associate AD for Academic Services at my university, my senior year of college. Now I'm going to start with that and then sort of segue back to the fact that I've been in aging since I was in third grade. I was president of the National Honor Society in high school. I had a 4-point-something GPA. I'm a smart kid. I always knew that. I got to college and became an athlete, and everything that means, given all of the academic support that comes along with that at a Power 5 school, so many academic resources. But I was still an athlete. And I felt like, now that I look back, the academic services were there to help us survive and get through. But it wasn't until Dr. Hilliard came my senior year that she saw me and pushed me to be that student piece of the student athlete. And how did she push me? She looked at me and was like, what are you doing? You can be doing more. How about you serve as a speaker for this event? She put me on a committee. We were doing our NCAA audit for the university. And so I was on this committee with all these big wigs at my university because she saw potential in me. She nominated me for the NCAA postgraduate scholarship, which means what? Now I have to go apply to get a master's degree. I would not have done that without Dr. Hilliard telling me to, but also telling me because she saw my potential. Again, representation matters. right? I knew there were people there to support me. We had an awesome support staff, but she was able to see something in me that nobody else did. And as a kid, I'm the child of a teacher. My mother is a retired educator. Education was always fundamental in my household. And like I said, I always was a good student, but I had the potential to be a great student. Dr. Hilliard was the first one to tell me that. She also happened to be the first Black woman PhD who was also in the athletic department. So that was something that I needed to see that has done a lot for me. And so in terms of what can people do, I think it is to that point of somehow working with our own biases, not looking at people and seeing limitations. We don't know what people are capable of. But for Dr. Hilliard to nominate me for that scholarship means that maybe I don't get it, but guess what? Maybe I do. And so to play a gatekeeper, I think is unfair. And so if people can just open up that gates and maybe advertise all the scholarships that are possible and ask the student athletes, which ones do you think you qualify for? I'll write your letters. Do that. I love to see what the student athletes at UNCG are doing. They are leading, but they are given the space to lead. And that is so, so important. In my experience, Dr. Hilliard was the first one to do that in a particular way. So that's the one thing that I will offer. The other example is my coach, named Dennis Craddock, white man from Southern Virginia. And he would say it all the time. But one small things matter. We were my senior year. We had ACC championships in Atlanta. Graduation, that was a very important meet. Graduation was on Sunday, May 9th, 2000. I'll never forget it. So May 8th, we had a track meet, but my one teammate who was also graduating, the both of us got to fly home. Everybody else had to ride the bus. But Coach Craddock and my teammate and I were walking through the airport. That was back when we had paper tickets. Everybody could walk to the gate. We got to the gate. Coach Craddock handed the gate attendant 3 tickets. She looked at him, looked right over me and my teammate and said, "Who is in your party?" Coach Craddock put his arm around me and said, "This is my daughter." That was it. It was funny. It was a joke. But he, in that moment, recognized that I had been overlooked. I had been made invisible by that gate agent. And just in his small way, he said, "You do matter." And we walked onto the plane, and that was it. We didn't have a whole big conversation about racism and how people, it wasn't even about that. It was, "You matter to me. And I have the opportunity to do something to show you that." And so those, I've listened recently to a lot around microaggressions, right? But micro validations are also very, 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 very powerful. And especially when you're talking about people who have been marginalized and do face those microaggressions, we got to figure out how to balance that out. And small things really can make a big difference. So those will be my 2 examples.
I think bouncing right off of that, you just talked about all of the people that tapped into your potential and made it purpose. You didn't even know your purpose until somebody gave it to you. Said, "No, your purpose is to get a master's degree, and your purpose is thus to get that PhD because your purpose is to educate," right? Like throw it right back on you. Let me tap into it. And so I think the way that we can tap into it, and coaches and support staff can tap into that potential to turn it into purpose is through language. So we have all of these words around us, and we often don't even define them. So my girl, Aretha, who I think is a philosopher in so many ways, right? Aretha Franklin said, RESPECT, find out what it means to me. She didn't just say respect, she said, find out what it means to me, right? So how can we be inclusive? How can we say that we're fighting towards equity? We don't even have a universal definition of what it's going to mean, and or we haven't defined what it's going to mean in our structures. For our players, right? For our coaches may be saying, to your students, go out there and be great. But if they have no common definition on what greatness looks like, how do they maximize or become great? Because generally, in my experience when playing college sport, when a coach was telling me to be great, they were telling me to be great on the field. Academics became an afterthought because every day after practice, we would huddle up together and they say, remember your grades. Remember to go to that study hall. We're going to be checking on you. But we weren't practicing academics 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, practicing football 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And then they gave 30 minutes to academic staff or tutoring that I had to make. So what's the message we're sending there? So if we're gonna say that we want our players to be great, that we want them to be student athletes, we have to define what that's gonna look like on each of our campuses, and then we have to deliver. We have to truly deliver. If we say that we're gonna be equitable, are our hiring policies and procedures equitable? Are they increasing the pipeline of those who are Black, those who are brown, those who are trans, those who are disabled? If we say that we're going to create a system of belonging, when making decisions and policies, is everybody at that institution in the room? At least one person from each identity. You have to define, again, what greatness, what inclusion, what equity is going to look like, and we all have to sit down and talk about it. And that's from a macro level, and that's from a micro level, right? Because micro validation and macro validation is real. You need both. You have to validate communities, and once you define, right, what inclusion is going to look like, now you throw in there that based on our idea of inclusion at UNCG, right, like, or based on our idea of inclusion at the University of Cincinnati, each coach is going to have to coach with compassion in mind. Each coach is going to have to coach to the player, but also to the person, character development, the athlete and the academic, right? All of those things are important, and we have to be able to define again what even a coach is going to be. Is the coach just there to coach skills, or are they there to coach life? Because what I heard was Deanne had coaches coaching life. So she had life coaches, right? And those life coaches were inevitably, right, power. They were change agents, barrier breakers, world shakers, right? Change makers. They were all trailblazers. I could keep going, right? But they were that because they tapped into her potential, they found her purpose, and they gave her a definition of it. You have to get A's. That's excellent for me. You have to get a master's degree. That's excellence to me. That's what we have to give.
Love it. It's awesome. Joe, I was thinking about your experiences, and you've had an amazing career, and what are some of the successes that you felt you've had in regards to race in sport? And what are the things? Is it conversations you've had with colleagues or teammates, or what are the? I feel like we're on this really awesome positive vibe, and I'm loving it, and it's a great thing. So what are the things that you have experienced that have been maybe life-changing in your mind?
Well, let me give you a tool, the audience a tool. So back in the mid 80s, I had retired from the NFL, went to seminary, and then I moved into one of the poorest census tracts in Baltimore, Maryland. Right at the time when crack hit the streets, was in an underserved community, developed a community center, and we did a lot of systemic as well as individual stuff. But I'd have all these good white people from the suburbs. I was a preacher at a large church at the time as well, and they'd come down to the community, but I saw they brought their own prejudices with them. They tended to view the community and the people from the wrong end of the telescope. Everything was minimized and marginalized. So I realized, really good people can be racist. they can be supporting of it, participating of it. So, recently, so I ended up teaching them how to develop a coherent racial narrative that makes sense, how they develop their own self-concept and concepts of people that were different than them. About a month ago, I did that for a Big Ten football staff. I had a couple sessions collectively, and basically you go review. I can take you through a process. You review your childhood, the neighborhood you grew up in, who lived in that neighborhood, who wanted to live in that neighborhood, how was the neighborhood formed. I went all through elementary school, high school, college, seminary. Never once had a black professor or teacher. What are those implications? All through sports, the initiatives. So anyhow, you have to bring staff, you have to bring athletic departments together in some kind of honest dialogue from the inside out and walking through our own narrative. Many of us, we're too protective. We're afraid to review our past, afraid to kind of we hold that fourth commandment, honor thy mother and father. We never ask hard questions about the family, the traditions that were passed down. So it's just going through kind of chronological order there. But all of us need to have some kind of narrative that makes sense out of. I would have told you my family had no racism in it, and yet, we certainly knew Japs was a verb, Jew was a verb. Colored people, everybody was different then. So I think when you have your narrative, and you have to learn just how much racism has been built into this country, into the culture in which we live. And someone my age, the miseducation that I had around the real history of this country, the systems and structures. So I had just read not too long ago Isabel Wilkinson's book on caste. CASTE. He basically takes American slavery and Jim Crow and compares it to the Hindus' caste system, with blacks being the lowest of the caste system. She studies Germany's, how they could annihilate 6 million Jews. They studied American racism. How it was legalized, because you have to dehumanize people in such a way to allow the general public to just stand by and be silent. So I think all of us really need to do our own individual work. You can become a coach and not have one course ever on anything relating to this, not having any understanding. So somehow we've got to come together collectively in a open, honest communication dialogue. We have so much to learn from each other. And, my experience with those black players at Syracuse in 1970, we're working on this documentary, but there was a grace and there was a forgiveness and an openness that was expressed to me that brought about a great deal of healing and hopefulness. But we got to educate young people. We make assumptions. They know about these issues. They've got opinions that are formulated on their own family cultures rather than facts and history. And I think coaches have to have some kind of training mandated that they understand what they're bringing to their players and how to help their players discover each other.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Those are great suggestions. I'm thinking about experiences that we've had at UNCG, and I know they're probably similar on other campuses across the United States. I think what I've heard today is that, we need to find ways to kind of show people's potential, that they're going to have potential for their purpose, right? And if we offer those opportunities to our students, especially our Black student athletes, they're going to show up, right? They're waiting for those opportunities, whether they know it or not. As people that lead departments, we need to have our own education, and we need to have a plan of how we're going to execute that education for others. Some of the things, and I'm probably going to do about one more question and then we'll wrap it up. But as we're working in our professional settings, And we feel, especially the people on this call, hopefully have a sense of learning, right? They're ready to show up, they're ready to change how they're thinking, or they're ready to take what they know and share it with the world. How do we take that and give it out to our students and give it out to empower our students to continue their education in race? So not just Black student athletes, but also white student athletes. How do we make sure that we can take what we know and impart that on them without, basically letting them have their own journey almost, but using our sense, because we do have a lot of control and power in where we sit. And so how do we make sure that we're giving that power back out to our students to then create their own purpose in a roundabout way? I don't know if that made sense.
I might be radical in my thoughts, so please, if y'all feel that way, but my thought is that this can no longer continue to be voluntary work. This has to be mandatory work. We can't leave it to some of our coaches, some of our student athletes, some of the administrators, because while some are doing the work, millions are dying. While some are doing the work, millions are hungry. And guess what? Those millions that are hungry, poverty knows no color. It's rural and it's Black, right? Like there is inaccess for those who are LGBTQ. You talk about inside out, there are people who can't even live, right? Like they have to keep everything inside of them. We can't let this inclusion work, specifically when we talk about race though, we can't let this work be voluntary any longer. We have to mandate that coaches, that athletes, everyone who's doing the work, we must educate them all. Then we must empower them all to use the education that we give them. Then we have to continue to engage with their communities, all of the communities that are marginalized. And then we have to continue to evaluate our systems. So after you educate, after you empower someone to use it, after you engage, if you're not evaluating your systems through policy, if you're not changing practices in the institution that are systemically racist, then your work is null and void.
Thank you.
And I think the numbers do matter, and they tell us a lot, right? If we're looking at metrics, I think Leland and I agree that opting in should no longer be an option. It should be tied to your evaluation. Either you learn and you grow and you do what you're supposed to do, or you get fired. Why do we allow people to stay around who are traumatizing student athletes? But also the numbers tell us a lot. I live on the NCAA demographics database. If you haven't been on it, check it out. But one thing that I noticed today is that 45% of the women's basketball players are Black women per the demographic database, 45%. 31% of assistant head coaches in women's basketball are Black women. That's the largest demographic group for assistant coaches. 17%, 59 Black female head coaches in women's basketball. And we have one at UNCG, Coach Patterson. But how do those numbers go from 45% to 31% coaching to now 17% as the head coach? Whatever you say, those numbers don't match up. So we have to figure out, yes, all of this stuff that people try to claim is hard to grasp and hard to understand, but numbers are really simple to read. We need to do better. We need to make sure that either we're doing a better job making sure that these student athletes have a positive experience so that they want to go on to coaching. Then we need to support them in that. And we need to make sure that they are given the shot at the top job when they're qualified for it. And if I look at these numbers, it doesn't seem like that is happening. So yes, there is work to do, but there's also common sense that we need to have, and to stop making excuses for these numbers that don't make sense.
You said speak from the data.
Yes. There's some scientists on the call, I know it. And the money is important. I mentioned earlier, USA Lacrosse, USA Tennis, U.S. Soccer Foundation just announced $5 million to put many pitches and lights in underserved communities. So we got to put money behind this stuff. You know, Sloan is not an accident in tennis. That is not an accident. That is intentional, and it comes from leadership, and it has to be clearly articulated leaders. We need to know what the purpose is. We need to understand that while if you are an athletic director or in a position of power, while you allow some student athletes to kneel, you are going to lose some of your donors. But you can't have both ways. Which one do you care about, right? Which one are we going to stand behind? And so those tough decisions matter when it comes to money, I know. But we can't continue talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion until we tie it to that money, and until we might be, not me, we, it's not my, my position, I know, but I do know that too often that has been the case. In athletics and out in education in more general, is how do we keep our donors happy as we're sort of maybe situationally trying to deal with these racial issues.
They say a social agenda without a financial agenda behind it is like a one-handed clap. There's just no movement there.
Great. That's awesome. Well, we have about 4 minutes to wrap up, so I just want to go around, and if you guys have any last words to share with the group, and then I'll wrap it up.
Well,
Joe, you want to start? Go.
Well, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Deanne and Leland. I just feel better having listened to and met you both. And I want to thank you for the work, but we have a lot of work to do. And whether there needs to be some kind of mandatory classes that college athletes or college coach, and we've got to professionalize the sport in much deeper ways in terms of transforming the lives and the culture that we live in. So to the audience that are working on this field, stay strong, keep the faith, but the journey is really inward, and until you deal with your own stuff, you can't be part of the solution. We got a lot of people sticking Black Lives Matter banners on their front lawns and this, but to really bring about the equity that needs to be brought about is going to take a much deeper change than slogans and stuff. So honored to be a part of this. Thank you all.
Joe, I told you I have my village, so I have my village watching today, and one just texted me and said, I appreciate Joe's honesty and can't wait to see the movie. And I agree that vulnerability is so important in moving us all forward, and we all have to have it. We all have stuff that we bring to the table. So I agree. This has been fun. Kristen, thank you for the invitation. Leland, it's been great. The only thing I would say is next time you talk about P. Diddy, you got to mention Mary. What in the world?
Mary, hey, look, I don't know if he made Mary, though. Mary made herself. Look.
She did, but come on, though. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun.
That is my girl. I'll leave you with this. The sky's falling, America. Can't you see? Maybe it's you, but I know it ain't me. America, land of the free, yet home of the slave, where people get robbed and corporate robbers get paid. America, proclaiming liberty and justice for all, yet the only liberty we get is from a mic or a ball. America, we were on our way to the pursuit of happiness, and you cut off our lights. You took our keys and you gave us the pipe. America, I thought we were one and indivisible. Instead, I'm just an invisible individual. America, one nation under God. The only America I see is one nation under facade. America, I can't pledge allegiance to thee until, America, you pledge allegiance to me. Thank you all for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this, but that's the embodiment of America that I see, and that we all need to change, and we all play a role in that. So go out, tap into the purpose of all of those around you, and explain what the real America is, and we'll get results.
Love it. Well, thank you. That wraps it up. We got one more minute. I feel like I could just listen to the three of you continue these conversations probably for the rest of the afternoon. I want to thank each of you for being here and taking time out of your very busy schedules. I have learned a lot, and I know that the athletics community that's on this call has too. And we value each and every one of your experiences and your input and your vision on what we can do to be better as individuals. So again, huge thank you to the Institute to Promote Athlete Health and Wellness and the Athlete Wellbeing Network. If you are not a member of the Athlete Wellbeing Network and you want to join, we will have that information posted in the chat. And our entire team here at Athlete Wellbeing Network would be willing to help you navigate through the wellness of your student athletes and staff. Thank you guys so much again. Appreciate your time. It was a great hour. I can't believe it's up, but have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.